Hi everyone, Scott Nixon here. I work with Aussie Way in digital accessibility, and I'm going to show you how you can set up your iPhone for VoiceOver. Now at the moment I have the VoiceOver settings set up on the phone already. Just a quick note, whenever you buy a new Apple device, be it an iPad or an iPhone, when you initially turn it on, a voice will ask you if you want to enable voiceover features. In this case, we're going to assume that you do, so all you have to do is take one finger and just tap it twice on the screen, just tap tap like that, and it will automatically set up voiceover for you. Now, what we want to do from here is we want to change some settings. So we're assuming that you have set up the iPhone or iPad. In this case, I'm using an iPhone. So we're assuming that you've got that all set up, but you want to make a few changes to the voiceover functionality. So we're going to look for the settings menu. Now I have the main screen up here. This is what we call the home screen. It has all the apps that you may have. I've set it up in my own personal way. So there are apps like Reddit and Prime Video, and all my video streaming services are on the front page really. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a one finger swipe to get the system working. Now I have all the sounds and everything turned on at the moment, and I also have VoiceOver running at a slower speed, so hopefully you'll be able to understand it. So we go like so, with a one finger swipe to the right. We're on messages at the moment, so swipe.
Calendar, Wednesday, August 14th.
And if you wanted to go back to messages, you one finger swipe to the left.
Messages.
Like so. Now you can do this to go to each individual app, or you can run your finger over the screen to where you think the necessary app may be. For example, I know that settings is on the second row on the right side of the screen, second from the end. So I would just go
Google.
Now you see, I've gone one row too far and I'm down on my Google search app. So I need to move my finger up, and you just slide your finger along the screen.
Settings, 2 new items.
To settings like that, and I have 2 notifications there. So we'll do it the other way, moving back and going to
Messages,
which is our top left hand app, and we'll swipe with our right finger.
Calendar, photos, camera, weather, clock, 16:16. Settings, 2 new items.
And there we are at settings. Now notice how after camera, when it moved down to weather, it went bonk. It gave the swipe sound, but it also gave it all like that. That means you've moved down to the next row of your available apps. They go 4 to a row on iPhones. It's much different on iPads, but you will be able to figure it out easily. So to open the settings menu, we do a one finger double tap. So tap tap.
Settings.
Okay, so it's opened my settings menu and it's put us right at the top. So we want to swipe down and we need to find the accessibility menu. So
Bluetooth, heading.
no, what has happened here is it's left me in a menu I was in earlier. So that's okay. Don't worry about that, because you can always go to the top left-hand corner of any page.
Settings, back button.
Back button. Like that. It'll tell you what section you're going to go to if you hit that back button. So double tap.
Settings.
And it's got me back on the settings menu. I'm going to put my finger near the top of the screen.
Settings, heading.
And it's right at the top of the settings in the heading. So we're going to go down to accessibility, okay?
Search field.
You can search for anything in the settings menu in that field if you want, but we're just going to quickly, for the sake of time, swipe down until we find accessibility. So we're swiping with one finger to the right.
Dictate, Scott Nick, finish set, software, Scott's airplane mode, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, mobile, personal, sounds, focus, screen, general, control, display, home screen, accessibility.
There we go,
button.
Accessibility. Double tap.
Vision, heading.
And we're at the top, which is vision, which means these are settings for people with vision impairments. So we have
VoiceOver,
the voiceover
on
function.
Button. Zoom,
we have
off button.
Zoom, which means you're able to use finger gestures like pinching your fingers on the screen to zoom text and change its size.
Display and text size
and
button.
also display and text size. Now we'll just go into that for a sec. So double tap.
Bold text switch button off.
So if you want the text to be bolder on the screen so it's easier for you to read, you can double tap that and it'll switch it on or off like so.
On. Off.
Just with a simple double tap like that. Moving down.
Larger text off.
Larger
Button.
text, same thing, and you'll be able.
Larger accessibility sizes switch button off. Apps that support dynamic type will adjust to your preferred reading size below.
Now, dynamic type is a special feature. It's a little more advanced, so we're not going to cover that today. We're just covering the very basics. So I'm going to go back.
Larger accessibility sizes switch button off. Larger text heading. Display and text size back button.
Going to go back.
Larger text off button. Bold text switch button. Display and text accessibility back button.
To the main accessibility menu because we want to go to
zoom
VoiceOver
on
so,
button.
Double tap.
VoiceOver switch button on.
Now, that is a very important button there. If you want VoiceOver to keep going, never double tap on that because it'll switch VoiceOver off. You can fix that though, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But just for now, don't worry about it.
VoiceOver speaks items on the screen. Tap once to select an item. Double tap to activate the selected item. Learn more. Link.
Now you see that link would open a page on the Apple website, which would give you more information and tutorials on how to operate VoiceOver with greater functionality, going into some more of the advanced settings and so on. But what we're looking for at the moment is we are looking to increase the speed of the voice because it's a little bit slow at the moment. So we're going to right swipe down.
VoiceOver practice button.
Practice is a good feature to try, but it can be a little bit difficult to get out of. That's just something you have to experiment with on your own. So we keep going.
Speaking rate heading.
Speaking rate, that's what we want.
Speaking rate 50% adjustable.
Now this is an adjustable field. So when you're on that, when the VoiceOver tells you that you're there, that means you can flip up or down with one finger swiping up to move it up or swiping down. So we'll slow it down first.
40%, 30%, 20%.
You see, and it goes right on down to 0, which is very slow. I like to speed it up a little bit. So
30%, 40%.
Swiping up with one finger.
50%, 60%, 70%, 80%, 90%. 100%.
See, 100%. I know people who use it on 100% and can hear it quite clearly, but even for me, that's a bit fast. So I like to have it on 60. But just for today, we're going to move it back down to 50.
90%, 80%, 70%, 60%, 50%.
There we go. And that is the handy-dandy way in which that you can organize your speech. And there are lots of different voices that you're able to try.
Speech button.
So if you go into speech, it'll have all different sorts of voices and a lot of information about how much space they'll take up on your phone. They don't really take up that much. And it gives you the ability to audition them, so to speak, listen to them, see what they sound like, and then you can adjust the pitch of them. They can sound higher, they can sound lower, deeper, or more pronounced. It's something that you really can get in and have a play with and work out exactly what works for you. But for now,
Braille button.
People with Braille inputs would go into that section. If you have a Braille keyboard that can do things in Braille, I suppose you could say. I don't personally use Braille, so that sort of thing is a bit out of my sphere of expertise. So
Voice over recognition button.
Voice over recognition, that is a relatively new feature and one that even I haven't played around with yet, which enables you to do further, more advanced things with the voiceover software. Now, we're running out of time here, so I just want to finish going through this voiceover list.
Verbosity button.
Verbosity, that just means how much is spoken, whether it speaks like punctuation and things like that.
Audio button.
Audio features, that's a very good one to remember. if you want to have it automatically detect that there's audio description on a particular app. Usually only works with the Apple TV app, but they are trying to get Netflix and Disney Plus and things like that to register it as well. So if you turn that on, audio description will work. And it also helps you with hearing aids and other audio devices that can be attached to your phone via Bluetooth. Check the Apple website for more information on that.
Commands button.
Commands, that's also another new feature which I haven't worked with yet.
Rotor button.
Now, the rotor is an interesting feature. If you put two fingers on the phone and move them in a clockwise or anti-clockwise direction, you can actually set up this rotor to have various features. So, for example, two fingers on the screen now, rotating anti-clockwise.
Words.
So words, it means it'll go word by word. So if now I swipe down with one finger,
rotor,
and bonk, that means you're at the end of the word. So if there was something with multiple words, I could go through, Jack is a man. And at the end, it will go bonk to tell you that it's the end. And then you'd go backwards, man A is Jack. And it would bonk when you're at the start of it again. So rotoring through again.
Characters.
You can go letter for letter. So
R.
I'm going backwards here with the
Romeo.
up signal.
O. Oscar.
And you can have it tell you, O stands for Oscar and things like that. You can also cut that out with other settings.
T. Edit.
Edit means you can alter where things are in the page. It's more of an advanced feature, but we're sticking with beginner stuff here.
Describe images on. Language default.
Language would mean what voiceover voice you're using. I have several different ones set up here. So let's just have a quick flick through those and we'll end the video there for this particular one. So just going through the voices I have.
English, US.
A more advanced version of this particular voice, which is called Ava, by the way, in the American section.
English, UK.
And that's Daniel. He is in the British version.
English, Ireland.
Irish English. As you can hear, that's our friend Moira.
English, India.
English India, that's Rajesh.
English, South Africa.
Tessa from South Africa.
English, Australia.
Karen from Australia.
English, Australia, default.
Now it says English Australia there, but it's actually American. That's a little bug they've got in there. But there you have it. That is how to get over into the voiceover system on your phone and organize what voice you want to use, organize pitch change, all that sort of thing. And the sounds that you hear.
Commands, rotor, activities, button.
Clicking and ticking as things are going, you can actually turn that off by using your rotor.
Sounds on.
And flick down once.
Sounds off.
There we go. And now.
Typing, but activities, rotor.
You don't hear
button.
those clicks and bonks and whatnot if you don't want to hear them, but we're going to turn them back on because we like them.
Sounds on. Activities
and they're
button.
on. Okay, so that is the first video in this series. I hope it's been helpful, and if anyone's got any questions, ask away.